What's up, guys? Hey, draft day. NFL draft is today, and the Broncos are on the clock. This is Off Field, powered by Accurate America. Boo!
Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show.
That's right. Welcome to the show. Off Field, I'm Nate Jackson. This is Brandon Krisztal, and it's draft day. Draft day 2025 is upon us. The Broncos are on the clock, choosing number 20, at least for now, Brandon. What I'm told is that they could trade up, they could trade back, or they could stand pat at number 20. What are your thoughts going into this draft? Of course, we're going to get into it. And you made a mock draft.
I did.
And we're going to break that down. I think you're the only person to do a mock draft this year in the media, right?
I think that might be true. I haven't really followed what everyone else has done.
Yeah.
But yeah, best I can tell, I'm the first person to say, hey, this is what I think the teams are going to do. And we'll see if I end up being right, being accurate in my predictions.
Like Accurate America. Is there a person in the media whose mock draft is kind of like the gold standard, or somebody who tends to be right all the time, or who ends up being someone that people really look to? Or is it the kind of thing where the day after the draft, no one even pays attention to how anyone's mock draft did?
Well, and so I heard Matt Miller, who's been doing mock drafts forever and has been a draft guru kind of on his own and with Bleacher Report for a bunch of years, but now he's at ESPN, so he's got a bigger audience. He brought up the point when I heard him talking about this earlier today with Dan Patrick, that you get like 8, maybe 9 right, and it feels like you hit a home run, because the second a trade happens, or the second, any move is made, or a team just surprises you like Detroit did when they took Jahmyr Gibbs, kind of everything else can get thrown off by one. I remember years ago when Peter Vesey and Charles Barkley were doing the draft on TNT, and Peter Vesey he was kind of Stephen A. Smith before Stephen A. Smith, and then everything he said was right no matter what. And he's like, all right, this is going to happen, and then the trade happened like at 3 or 4, and every pick Barkley was just like, well, so I thought you said this was he did it for the whole round, and it got like almost annoying, but it was funny because he didn't let up. So, but as far as people that you trust, and I'm not trying to pick on the people that put out 8, 9 of them. Daniel Jeremiah is as good a draft analyst as there is, but I don't know if Daniel Jeremiah is talking to teams the same way Peter Schrager talks to teams. And then Bruce Feldman puts one out there. He's a college reporter for The Athletic now, long time with Fox Sports. He talks to college coaches who are then talking to teams about their guys and about what they're hearing. So there's guys like Peter and Bruce's that I look to a little more. I look at theirs a little more closely, because I know that Peter Schrager has the relationship that he has with Sean McVay, because he did a whole podcast with him for a whole season.
Yeah.
And he sat next to Sean Payton at Fox. So there's some guys, and then other people like Adam and Ian doesn't even do one. But Adam
does one?
And I don't know if Adam does one either. Adam just throws stuff that he's hearing.
Yeah.
But when you're an information broker, you're having to help agents out. You're having to help. When I say help out, like, you're hearing so much, trying to figure out what is smokescreen and what isn't.
Right, because any executive on a team, GM, coach, they know, even if they like you, they know you're in the media. They know you're putting together a mock draft. They know people know you know me, and they know that. So is there some funny business happening? I mean, could even Peter Schrager be playing the game for some of his buddies and floating information that he might know is inaccurate to get people to believe that Sean Payton or Sean McVay are going a route that they're actually not?
Well, I'll go one step farther than that, and is Peter Schrager doing that? Maybe, although I think you have to play both sides of it. So you have to know, like, how good of a friend are you? Like when Chris Sims said he thought Mac Jones was going to be the pick for San Fran, and he and Kyle Shanahan literally have matching tattoos with a couple of other Texas teammates.
What tattoo?
You can Google it, but they were all in college.
A unicorn on their ankle?
They were all in college when the movie The Wood came out.
Okay.
So they all have a W with each of their jersey numbers around it. So
wow.
Kyle on his lower leg, and Chris, and I think BJ Thomas or Sloan Thomas and BJ Johnson and maybe one other guy all have Rod Babers. I think all the 5 of them have the matching tattoo.
Did you do any kind of matching tattoo or anything with your buddies back?
No, I don't have any matching. If I did one, I'd match one to some song lyrics that my wife has on her spine that I would maybe get.
And what song lyrics are those?
It's from an Avett Brothers song.
Oh, can you sing it for us?
I'm not going to sing it, but I'll show it to you another time or tell you.
Me and my buddies, we have matching lighter burns on our ankles. Like, so if you like
Car lighter? Oh no. Yeah.
and then you hold it upside down for like a minute or two, it turns into basically a red hot brand.
Yeah.
And then we all did that. Funny enough, we did that because my buddy was going away to the Army, and he did one on his arm. And then when he went to go get his physicals and stuff for the Army, he had an open wound on his arm, so he couldn't be enlisted. He had to wait 6 months and then come back. Those were not fun because we woke up sticking to the sheets, and it took months for those to heal. I still have that.
Can I see it?
Yeah, it's right there.
I mean,
can you see it?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, it's like a smushy pink.
Yeah, I don't have any tattoos, but there's a couple that I've thought about. So, those song lyrics are one of them. But having one with any of my buddies has not really come up.
Well, do you think Sean Payton and George Payton?
One thing on the Sean Payton thing. So Peter Schrager and Sean are pals. Sean Payton's daughter Megan put out a mock draft.
Oh,
she has Omarion Hampton 20, which is what we've seen the most.
Megan's mock
But
draft.
if there's one person that's no problem giving someone he's close to the wrong information, including his own daughter, it's Sean Payton.
And she might be playing a game too.
Very, very much so.
You know, like he's like, here, honey, like this is what we're going to do. Because Sean Payton is like, here's what we're going to do, kind of a guy.
That's why JJ McCarthy was coming to the Broncos.
Right.
So many people.
Peyton Manning was out there.
Yeah.
On the phone. We remember that last year. Peyton Manning was out there talking about how much they loved JJ McCarthy. They really loved Bo Nix, and they didn't want to indicate it at all. And so I wonder if there's a surprise in store because of, all the things we've heard. Sean Payton, George Payton in their press conferences, they talk about the needs. They talk about the things they like. Isn't that all a smokescreen? Why would they give any accurate information to anyone?
I think human nature, unless you're Bill Belichick, who does have it down as well as anybody as far as being a robot, and he's had to change that a little bit over the last couple of years, and will continue to have to change that.
Well, he's a robot with a new life now.
Yeah, new life, but he's taken more pictures with high school kids in the last 3 months than he has probably his whole life as a professional coach, because you have to show that you're out playing the game and you're. But in general, I think we all know what their teams need. So it would be ridiculous for George and Sean to sit there after not signing a running back, losing Javonte Williams, and then saying, yeah, I guess the running back class is okay. Like, no one's going to believe them when every other evaluator is saying, with Ashton Genty, with Hampton, with the 2 Ohio State kids, with Cam Scadaboo and all the others in between, that this isn't a good running back class, or this isn't a really good tight end class. And so they're saying, yeah, we might take one, but just like last year, you thought they might take a quarterback. They knew the one they wanted. So they're not going to tell you which one they like until they draft them. I sit here, and unless it's Ashton Genty, and I don't think they're going to trade all the way up to go get him, I have a hard time believing that at 20, that they are going to take a running back. Yeah. Because Genty's going to be gone. And I've talked to people in the building who I trust that say that other than Genty, none of them are worth 20. And Sean's only taken a running back twice ever in the first round. They both had Heismans, and both fell to them.
Right. And I talked to Tyler Columbus today, and we're gonna show some of those clips today in the broadcast and stuff like that. But he talked about, and I asked him about the system for a running back, because you remember in the Shanahan era, it didn't matter who you put back there; he was getting 1,000 yards, right? Because it was about the system, about the offensive line. It was about the wide zone. It was about getting a running back who could see those cutback lanes. But you didn't need to overreach on a guy and draft him in the first round. In fact, a lot of these coaches who rely on their systems know that, or at least find pride in finding a guy later in the rounds that can turn into a stud. Then it's on me, the coach. And then I'm the one who did it, not you, the stud running back who I just had to plug in and just call any play and you made it work. I made it work. And Sean Payton is kind of like that offensive genius guy who wants to take credit for the offense's success. He doesn't want the players to be the reason necessarily. Obviously, he understands the value of good players, but he also wants himself and his scheme to be part of it. Do you think that factors into the running backs? Do you think, well, let me reframe that. Tyler said that he believes this system is not one that you can just plug a 5th or 6th round running back in. You need to draft a guy in the first round who can make something out of nothing and is not reliant on a system that's tried and true. How do you feel about that?
I think I agree with what Tyler meant fundamentally, in that this isn't even what Kyle's had, and we've seen that. And at times Mike McDaniel running a similar thing to what Kyle has, and they're running modern versions of what Mike ran here with those teams that you were a part of, where it was every year a different 1,000-yard back. And Bobby Turner, the running backs coach, is still with Kyle. But I think that there are types of backs that fit, and they don't all have to be first-round picks. And Sean's also the guy that wants to remind you, hey, we got Alvin Kamara in the 3rd round because we were looking at the safety, and next thing you know, oh, we think he's going to be gone. He told the story about how he thought he was getting drafted by the Bengals, and then he ends up not going, and he falls to them in the 3rd round. He'd much rather tell you that they had a 2nd-round grade on a kid they get in the 4th, or a 1st-round grade on the kid they get when they trade up in the 2nd to go get him tomorrow, potentially, or even if they trade back tonight, but at 33, let's say they trade with Cleveland, which is what my mock draft has, and they stay there or jump up a spot to go get, it feels like Travion Henderson fits what they want to do and fits that Alvin Kamara. He looks like a clone of Alvin Kamara almost in his body type and the way he plays. And so I think that Sean still wants to do that. He wants to be the guy that is the smartest guy in the room and says, hey, we saw value in this guy. And then look, we were right.
Yeah, and he's, you got Evan Ingram, so you got one of your jokers. You might be going after another guy, maybe one of those running backs is a joker type of guy, and maybe a tight end as well. So, and you've already got guys you like to throw the ball to, Cortland Sutton. You want to get Marvin Mims the ball. By the way, Devon Vele coming on, so you want to throw him the rock. And then also Troy Franklin is a guy they like and want to develop. So there's only one football to go around. And I've been in that room where I'm like, hey, I can catch the ball too. What about me? And they're like, no. You're on kickoff team.
We've got Rod Smith. We're
yeah, exactly.
Him.
And so there's only one football to go around. You got to understand that some of these guys will be playing special teams, but it also probably factors into the way that you go about drafting. Are you going to draft a guy who's a workhorse type of running back in a system that spreads the ball around and has so many different packages and personnel groups to take advantage of a defense? I don't know about that. So before we get really into the weeds with the Broncos and what you think they're going to do, let's talk at the top of the draft, because you did a mock, and I imagine you had Cam Ward going number 1 overall.
I did. The least guarded secret in the draft this year. And Brian Callahan, the coach there, was also in Cincinnati, and I know behind the scenes, has at least talked about how they knew they were taking Joe Burrow. The NFL didn't want you to let it out a month ago.
Yeah,
it came out 2 days ago.
Okay,
but when Cam
Ward's, they already told him.
Cam Ward's on a live stream talking about the best running backs in football, and he lists Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, and then Tony Pollard and the other kid on the Titans, and then best receivers, and it's AJ Brown, St. Brown, and the kid that they had the 1st round of him a couple of years ago, whose name from Ole Miss.
They don't have anything. Gosh, that's going to be so hard. I mean, just think. Yeah,
he needs some help, but it's like he's listing Titans players in the top 4 while he's on some Twitch video game stream. It's like, okay, we get it.
Well, you just think about the path
Treylon
to
Burks.
Success. Yeah, exactly.
That's one of the best 4 receivers in the NFL, according to Cam Ward.
But you just like the path to success for a 1st overall pick at quarterback is not easy, because you're going to a very bad team with not a lot of help. I imagine the offensive line isn't great. The running back, Tony Pollard, not a bad running back, probably middle of the pack there in the NFL, but not a lot of receiver help. Defense, okay. I mean, it's going to be a hard road for Cam Ward, but what is it about Cam Ward that's making him the surefire number 1 pick?
I think his physical traits are just significantly better than any of the other quarterbacks coming in, and he's played in, like so many of these guys, played at different schools, played in different systems, and done well in all of them, whether it was Incarnate Word, Washington State, or now at Miami, where
so he played at 3 different places.
He played at 3 different places. Didn't start at a D1 as a top prospect. Isn't the son of a Hall of Famer. Isn't the kid going to USC like Jackson Dart was. Doesn't work out there. Goes to Ole Miss.
It's very rare that a player just plays his whole college career at one college anymore.
I know.
Yeah, and so I think it's a harder transition to the NFL because you're kind of swimming as far as.
Is it harder or is it easier because you're changing? You're like, well, I had to go offense to offense.
Yeah, but it's like, whenever someone has a different offense coordinator each year, it's very hard on them because, the game is the same, but the terminology changes and the rules change. And when you have this coach and then you have that coach, you don't really get rooted in a system and really get to dig into that system, peel back the layers and really learn the nuance to every play. Every play has an installation you learn it and then you learn the layers to it. What's going to happen if? What's going to happen if? Oh, but what if they do that? What if they do that? And if you're always switching systems, those layers aren't as deep, right? You think about Alex Smith when he first got into the league and he had like 4 coordinators in 4 years with the Niners, really bad years, but then he got some continuity. You do learn from that. You learn a lot of different systems, but are these kids pro ready and ready to go out there and succeed? Some are not, right?
Well, and to that point, Bo Nix a year ago Get Sean Payton. That's his 6th offensive coordinator in 6 seasons. This is the first time since high school that, or maybe his 2nd year at whatever.
So Bo had one new and one every year.
Yeah,
Were they changing the system in Oregon when he was there? Or
the OC who was with them to start, I guess he came back to him, right, in Dillingham.
Yeah.
Dillingham was with them with Gus Malzahn, I think, at Auburn. Then Dillingham's at Oregon. He goes to Oregon, but then Dillingham the next year is at Arizona State in Bo's final year at Oregon. And then he's with Sean for a year. But also we saw last year with Alex Singleton and Pat Surtain and guys like that were so happy after a few years of different defensive coaches, even though they were all kind of running similar versions of Vic's defense, but it was a couple different years, that they had continuity and knowing what VJ wanted, VJ knowing what he had in them. And look at how much better the defense was from year 1 to year 2 in terms of their, top end performance and consistency. So I guess it might condition you. You have to be the right guy, right type of player that can handle these different systems, offense or defense.
And physically speaking, Cam Ward, how tall, how big? I mean, kind of like prototypical.
6'3", in that 225-ish range.
And by all accounts,
runs well, doesn't run great, but runs well enough.
Yeah. And by all accounts, a really strong arm, accurate passer.
Yeah, not as accurate as Shedeur, but Shedeur, I think, the most accurate passer in NCAA history.
What does that mean, percentage-wise? Completion?
Just completion percentage.
And a lot of that is based on the system, right? Spread them out, 4 wide, everything's quick pass, catch and release, like, underneath stuff. That'll help you have a high. And the same was true with Bo Nix the previous year. He had a very high completion percentage. A lot of it is short passes. People use that as a knock against Bo. It's not his. He didn't design the system, right? He's just standing there throwing it to the guy who's open. And the NFL is geared toward quick passes. That's what Pat Mahomes does. That's what these successful quarterbacks do. This new defensive look with the defense is keep everything in front of you and then go make a tackle. So you do have to be accurate. You do have to be on time. And Cam Ward, Shedeur are both pretty accurate, pretty on time. And there was a time when it was like one or two. Which one was? When did Cam sort of emerge as the clear-cut number 1?
I think the Titans and other organizations saw him at his pro day, kept going over the tape, met with him at the combine. And I think because Shedeur is such a big personality, and I understand the attacks on his character, he's just kind of being himself. And if you've been around him enough, I don't think it's as off-putting as 15 minutes in a room with an old coordinator that's going to be like, or an offensive coach like, I didn't like his vibe. Well, okay, that may be true, but I get that he's not the same guy that you coached in the 80s. And so is
it that simple as like him wanting it to be like some guy he coached in the 80s? Because aren't these coordinators in the NFL now, aren't they used to dealing with this generation?
Sort of, but this is a whole different, this is an extra layer to that.
The NIL.
Because Shedeur's walking in and he has more money in his pocket, not his dad's pocket. He has more money. Like Chris Sims is the son of an longtime NFL player, but, Phil didn't make hundreds of millions of dollars and then give it to his kids.
Right.
Phil made good money and then had a good job, but Chris had a nice car.
Yeah.
But Chris didn't have 10 million of his own dollars that he's earned.
Right.
Shedeur's walking in with 10 million bucks in his pocket that he's made by being Shedeur and a quarterback. And when you're a position coach who's been in the league for 40 years and you're finally making 350 grand or whatever.
Yeah.
And you're seeing this kid who's all iced out and he wasn't over the top, but he was still, he had a chain or two on. He has a fancy watch. Part of his celebration. He's always got a smile and he's very confident. But I think that Cam's physical tools, he made enough big plays and big moments. He had a big comeback on Friday night that I remember him making a bunch of plays that I think that the Titans feel good enough about Cam Ward that they can move on from Will Levis and then Brian Callahan and Mike Borgonzi and their Chad, their president of football ops, are going to tie their fortunes to Cam Ward at least for a year or two.
A couple years, right? And they're moving on from that mayonnaise eating mother, you know what I mean?
The mayonnaise and the coffee.
Yeah, that's kind of, you lost me at mayonnaise.
I can't swear Will Levis will be cut, but if Cam Ward looks good in the spring, it won't surprise me if Will Levis is not on their roster even when camp opens.
Yeah. All right, let's move to the number 2 pick. You got Travis going number 2?
100%. The only way that changes is if somebody offers such a big package.
Right.
The Browns we can't pass up 6 picks.
All right. So what about if you could throw that Lurker Troy comment up there, Andy, if you could. What about moving up to get Hunter? If we're going to move up, the Broncos could use a guy like, everyone could, right? But let's think about logistically how that would work for the Broncos. They'd probably have to give up 3 number ones, maybe a player, maybe a second-round pick here or there, whatever it might be. And then how does he fit on the team? The Broncos maybe do have a need at receiver. Is it that kind of a player at receiver? I would say no, because I think they need like a route runner guy, a guy who's like can turn into a pretty polished route runner.
I think Hunter has some of that though.
You think so?
And I don't want to put too much into a pro day, but standing there by Sean Payton, we're watching Travis Hunter running almost everything underneath. He went deep like once, and deep wasn't even deep. But if you go back and watch, and it's on NFL Network, you can find it. Every one of his routes, it was reminding me of Jerry Jeudy's workouts. He was like almost exaggerated in his quick twitch stuff and showing you that I'm going to get this separation, which we saw him get plenty against defenders the last 2 years, and also do stuff with the ball afterwards that I think he can develop into that if that's what he works on and he's got the right coaching. And certainly it seems like he has the right mentality. I'm not saying they didn't coach that at CU or at Jackson State. I just think they kept him off the practice field a lot because
at CU
certainly during the season. But now that this is your job, and I'm not saying he hadn't taken it seriously before, he can spend a whole lot of time and he can get with some of the best route runners of all time. He can probably get with Jerry Rice and talk to Jerry Rice about running routes. He can be on whatever his position coach is going to do. He can really become the technician on both sides of the ball. That's the one thing Champ talked about too, in terms of playing corner. But a team like the Broncos, you said lots of teams could use him. The Broncos have their number one in Cortland Sutton. I get that he may not be true upper echelon, but his numbers have been really good the last couple of years. You've got some other pieces like we mentioned with Franklin and Vele and obviously Mims. And then you've got the best defensive player in football who happens to play corner, and a really solid one in Riley Moss.
Yep.
I think they like Jaquan McMillan. I don't think they love him, but you could figure out ways to use him. And so to me,
do you like that idea?
I love the idea. And when you wrote it, and I tweeted it the other day on top of what Schefter had said about teams calling for 2 and 3. And then there was a clip out there about him saying, like, a while back on a podcast, I'd love to stay here so I could stay in Colorado.
Yeah.
So I'm like, why not pull a Ricky Williams move where you're basically, now they traded that whole draft that year for the Saints to go get him. It didn't necessarily work out. Part of that was on Ricky Williams and his approach to football at the time. But I
just wanted to be taking bong loads, man.
Yeah. I mean, he's just taking it easy. It's fine. I mean, Ricky obviously turned into a great back for a spurt like we thought he might be, but wasn't sustained, and he didn't love football. I think it's worth it. 3 number ones for sure. Maybe you're number 2 this year, or maybe future 2s and like you're going to talk about 6 or 7 picks easy. And I think if you make the trade once the draft starts, I think you're allowed to trade a final 4th. You can't trade 3 first-rounders before the draft. But once the draft starts, it unlocks that 4th year.
Oh, is that right?
I think so. You could trade 4 number ones.
4 number ones for Travis.
But you've got your quarterback for 4 more years under a rookie deal.
Yeah.
And you've got the O-line in place around him for the most part. You've got pieces on defense that are pretty well set.
And you've got a GM who knows how to find value beyond the first round. Marvin Mims, 2nd rounder. Nick Benito, 2nd rounder. Quinn Miners, 3rd rounder. Jonathan Cooper and Devon Vele, 7th rounders, right? So that pro day at CU, Sean Payton was there, along with a lot of personnel from the Broncos. Now, Sean Payton's never met a national broadcast he didn't want to be a part of. He knew that. He was on ESPN. He was over there. But at the same time, they went for a reason, right?
They didn't have to be there because they had plenty of people that were already there.
Yeah.
They were having scouting meetings that morning, draft meetings, and it timed out because of when the TV show was. They were able to get out of their meetings, and by the end of, really as they hit the field, Sean Payton, George Payton, Vance Joseph was already up there because I think they were probably on offensive meetings in the morning. There were a couple other coaches that were there, a couple other personnel people. But by the end, pretty much the whole staff was there. Davis Webb came up separately because he showed up way later. But so you had Davis Webb there too. And I think that, a good chunk of
why
their
would
staff
Davis
was
Webb
there.
be there unless he was scouting a pass catcher? You know what I'm saying? To complement that quarterback. Any other pass catchers out there who they might be considering, or at least
In the world or from CU?
No, at CU. Why they would be up there?
Well, I think that the 2 guys that don't get as much attention as Travis Hunter, understandably, but Jimmy Horn Jr. is an NFL receiver, and I think can probably be an NFL returner. And then LeJontay Wester is a legit NFL returner who will likely be in a team's rotation at receiver, even though he's slight, and he definitely is. He's not as small as Tez Johnson, but talking with some folks up there that day, they're like, hey, this kid is going to play. I don't care where he's drafted. He might be a 3rd day, even a free agent. He's like, he's going to make a roster. He's going to be the returner most likely, and he will play. Now here they have Marvin Mims, so he maybe makes a little less sense here.
Yeah.
But a LeJontay Wester, even if Jimmy Horn gets drafted higher, and then Will Shepherd catches everything thrown to him.
Yeah.
So all those dudes are going to be players. But receiver's a position that I like. If the Broncos stick at 20, I like receiver more than running back for them to pull that trigger, just based on the value of those receivers.
So back to Travis a little in his pro day as a receiver. I think that, if he ends up on a team, and I know he said he wants to play both ways, and if he doesn't play both ways, he doesn't want to play at all. Could have been a little bit hyperbolic, like I said in that article that I wrote. Check out GorillaSports.net and check out the article that I wrote about Travis Hunter coming to the Broncos and what that would actually look like. But that's also could be a play for him to try to secure more money, because the more you play, the more money you are going to make. Not just from your performance bonus based on number of plays you're out there, because players do get paid at the end of every season based on how many plays they were on the field. There's a performance bonus system in place in the NFL that awards guys who have a lot of playing time. So he would get a lot of money there, but also if he were to play both ways for 3 years and do so at a high level, could probably demand a contract that nobody's ever seen before. I threw out some pretty high numbers there, but Jamar Chase makes $40 million a year. Derek Stingley Jr. makes $30 million a year. Those are the two highest paid guys at their position. What if you were a top 5 player at both positions? Could you then demand
70?
Maybe not 70, but somewhere in the neighborhood of a quarterback salary.
If he truly is an every down player or a multi-down player, and that's the other thing too, talking about the Broncos, because of all the packages, you can be a full-time receiver. Now you're going to need to understand the meetings, but you're not going to play full-time, very likely. Cortland Sutton does. But we saw Lil Jordan as much on the field as we did Marvin Mims, who's technically their number 2, certainly their second most productive. You're going to see a bunch of different tight end packages. So a team with multiple receiver sets benefits him, and a team with a good secondary also benefits him. But then you can still play him a lot, and I think that he has a chance to rewrite the conventional thinking, and then it's up to the team and the agent at that point. But you're not just out there for snaps to raise your snap count. He's got to be able to contribute on both sides. And I think him saying that is he's not going to get drafted and then not show up at minicamp.
Right. Of course. He knows that he's an investment for whatever team. They're going to use him how they feel is right. There's not a lot he can do about
People
that.
keep saying make him a return. I'm like, let's hold off on adding stuff.
Yeah.
He'll have enough on his plate. You can find a returner.
Yeah. But whoever they find has to have a plan for him. The offensive, whoever drafts him has to have a specific plan. And that's why I think Sean Payton would be a good coach for him, because he'd have a very specific plan. He wouldn't just send him out there willy-nilly to take every snap. He would have a package for him. He'd be able to use him as a decoy. He'd be able to use him in really creative ways. And he would have a good plan for him. Speaking of having a plan, accurate America. You never know when or where the hail is going to hit, guys. And it can happen anytime in Denver. Even in the summer, the storms come, boom, your roof gets hit. The last thing you want is to be caught scrambling when it does. So make the call before the storm. That's right. Make that call before the storm. Call Accurate America. They'll partner with you on navigating insurance, which can be a headache, and provide quick, professional, and knowledgeable service using the latest technology and 3D modeling. And their work is guaranteed as long as you own your home, guys. Don't scramble at the last minute. Call our friends at Accurate America today. 303-900-ROOF. Before the storm, that's 303-900-ROOF. All right.
My mock draft is live.
Oh, it's
on
live.
GorillaSports.net.
So where can you check? On GorillaSports.net, they can check that out.
Yeah, just go to GorillaSports.net, and it's right there.
Yep, it's right there. All right, back to Travis a little bit as a receiver, because when I watched his pro day, him running routes on air, and what they say is when you're not being covered, it's routes on air, and he was doing a lot of the moves and stuff that to me as a former NFL receiver, I say, what are you doing? There's no one covering you.
Right.
Who are you juking?
Hey,
right?
Practice how you play.
Well, there is a thing that happens, like the Jerry Jeudy stuff. Like there was a reason why Jerry Jeudy wasn't successful here the first couple of years. He was a really polished route runner, but he was too much of that.
He might be the king of that.
Yep. He was like, do the 2-step. All of a sudden, you're behind. You're not where you're supposed to be. Where you're supposed to be there. The Jerry Rice school of running routes is to accelerate off the ball as fast as you can on every route, and every route looks the same the first 3 steps. That's the Jerry Rice thing. Jerry Rice never did the sidestep, scoop, skip, shuffle off the line of scrimmage ever. He was not that guy. He was everything is looking the exact same. My shoulders are always pointing the exact same way up the field. And when I break, you have no idea where I'm going because I'm trying to step on your toes. And so every other receiver coach I've ever played with preaches that sort of approach to route running. The okey doke stuff that he was doing to me was a little hokey. And any receiver coach, any offensive coach, they're going to clean that stuff up. What you can't teach with Travis is his incredible ball skills and nose for the football and the football moment. He's a DB who attacks the football like Randy Moss. He might just be the ultimate unicorn.
I can't wait to see where he lands. Cleveland isn't as exciting. Apologies to our pal Shelby Harris, who will be part of our draft coverage tonight. We got an autographed Browns helmet back here that I found at Goodwill for $3.99, and he was nice enough to sign it. Maybe we'll get Travis to sign it too.
Yeah,
and Myles Garrett raise the value.
Yeah,
but I just hope. And Kevin Stefanski is a good coach.
Yeah,
and I think he has a good approach. And Andrew Berry from the jump at the combine, and then again at the owners' meetings, and again last week, has said, he's the GM there, he said, we envision him as a receiver who can also play corner.
Yeah.
Because that's the hardest thing to do. That's why Jamar Chase is getting $40 million and Derek Stingley's getting 30 and PS2 and Jalen Ramsey and those guys are getting 25 million. It's still incredibly difficult to cover them. And you can argue the value, but you win games by, obviously, someone has to score. And if you're the guy that can do it better than anyone, and Travis may end up being one of those type guys that is a 8 to 12 touchdown guy every year, then you have to play him at receiver a lot and figure out how to use him on defense. But the good coaches, like I'd love to see him with Sean McVay, but he's not going to end up there. I'd love to see him perhaps with Kyle, but forward-thinking coaches, and Sean Payton is that. Andy Reid. I think Kevin is, creative enough, but we'll see what that commitment is. And thankfully, they do have Jerry Jeudy, who's a Pro Bowl wide receiver.
Yeah.
And they do have Denzel Ward, who's a Pro Bowl level corner.
Right.
Probably, I think he's been in a Pro Bowl, but was literally a top 5 pick. He was picked ahead of Chubb at 4.
Yeah.
So they've got those guys that he's not going to be counted on to come in as the number 1 corner, number 1 receiver. And I think that'll be good if he ends up in Cleveland, which is what we expect.
Yeah, we were talking about Travis's ball skills and also the defenses these days in the NFL, keeping everything in front of them, and the short stuff underneath stuff is open. The Broncos need a guy to be able to take a short one and take it the distance. They haven't had that guy. Marvin Mims could emerge as that guy, but Cortland Sutton doesn't break a lot of tackles. Devon Vele, he's a big body guy. He's not going to take one for 3 yards and take it to the house. Travis Hunter did that like a lot. And some of that was because of the competition and his superior athleticism, but he's going to be able to do that at the NFL level. And then, so that's the short stuff that he could take the distance, but also the high point ball skills that he has down the field from being a DB, from being able to open his hips and attack that football in the air and understand the angles. And that's a skill that you cannot teach. You just have it or you don't. When it comes to the timing of a football and knowing where to cut off the angles and stuff, Travis Hunter has that. So what a blockbuster trade that would be. What an exciting day that would be for the Denver Broncos and Denver Broncos fans. Probably the most exciting trade-up moment the Broncos would have ever had, right?
Absolutely.
For a Heisman Trophy winner, a local guy who's staying home.
Yeah, the only other thing that'll even come close to comparing would be when they finally pulled off the trade for John Elway.
Yeah.
They didn't do that on draft day.
Yeah.
And we almost thought the Aaron Rodgers trade was going to happen a couple of years ago on draft day.
Yeah.
And Nathaniel Hackett's one and only year here, and that would have made sense. Or was it the year before? No, I guess it was that year, right?
Yeah. It was the Hackett year.
Yeah, it was a Hackett year.
Yeah.
Either way, no.
Thanks, Conga, by the way.
Yeah.
Good article, Nate. Thank you. Appreciate that.
But realistically, and we know Sean's not opposed to doing things that aren't conventional.
Right.
How would you be with them sacrificing most of this draft? Let's say it was more than we thought in this year's draft to go with those ones. It's basically this year's draft, the first, the second, the third, one of those 6 as well. They have 3 6. They have a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 3 6s. So it's 1, 2, 3, a 6. Next year's 1, and a 1 after that.
Yeah.
And maybe there is even a player that gets thrown in, a Jaquan McMillan. I'm just picking, or Riley Moss gets thrown in.
That's quite a lot for one dude, and for a guy who's trying to do something that's never been done. There's a reason why it's never been done.
Even with guys like Champ and Dion.
Yeah, because human beings, they have a threshold. We haven't found what that threshold is yet. But you're going against the biggest, baddest dudes on the planet here in the NFL, and we're going to find out what that threshold is. And it is a big risk to take a swing like that, but it would be pretty darn exciting. All right, let's move on to the number 3 pick. There's a lot of conjecture with this one. Would the Giants draft Shedeur Sanders? some reports coming out lately. We touched on earlier that maybe people are losing a little bit of their love with Shedeur. Who do you have at number 3?
I have Abdul Carter right now because he's just too much of a can't miss prospect. There's some rumblings that Shedeur could go there. A lot of buzz now about Jackson Dart between Joe Shane's, he's the GM of the Giants, Joe Shane's son, posting something on social media about Jackson Dart.
Wow.
And this is the same kid that said last year to trade up and get Jaden Daniels.
Oh.
So when they had the behind the scenes,
Yeah.
he's like, who should we take? He's talking to his family there in his office. And his son's like, Jaden Daniels, and walks out.
And they didn't do it.
His daughter's at Ole Miss, so
Yeah.
he's probably been down to that campus a couple times, I'm
Yeah.
sure. Made a scouting trip out of it. Obviously, Ole Miss in the SEC. They have offensive lineman or defensive lineman in Walter Nolan, who's going to go high too. But I think that you go with the safe pick, and then you start getting creative. You do have Russell Wilson in the building, sitting courtside at the Knicks with his celebrity wife. You do have Jameis Winston in the building, but you're only committed $15 million to those guys. So that's all the guaranteed money to them at all. You can easily draft a quarterback. I think you go with the safe pick unless John Merrick comes in and says, no, I want a quarterback. And that's always going to be the trump card. Joe Shane and Brian Daboll, I don't think are worried about Deion taking their job.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more, if we take Shedeur, yes, he can maybe beat out Russ and Jameis. He might. Russ beat out Matt Flynn. I realize it's different. But if the owner says that, then that makes him a worse team this year, I think. Unless Shedeur comes and wins the job and wins games, and that's obviously, otherwise you're drafting a guy that you're going to develop. And will those guys even be there to develop him? But they're doing it at the owner's behest. And then when they win 7 games, they get fired.
Yeah.
And they're not even there to develop them.
So Shedeur apparently broke 100 records at CU. That's a lot of records.
It is. I don't know how many they keep, but
right.
he broke
Yeah,
most
apparently they keep those. But he went 13-12 as a starter. What do you think these scouts are giving more value to? The numbers that he put up or the wins and the losses?
I think he's the most, not confusing, just challenging enigmatic prospect this year.
Yeah.
I mean, for the last couple of years, because Josh Allen didn't win a bunch of games at Wyoming. That we can go through lists of QBs that just didn't have great teams around them. He did have the best player we've seen in maybe forever, if not ever. But that's still only one guy that is relying on getting the ball thrown to him. Or
but you also talked about the rest of the receivers who, all have prospects to play in the NFL. So he,
and their left tackle this year, I get he was a freshman, but he was the highest recruited freshman that they've ever had. One of the, Tyler Plummus, who you talked to, I remember hearing him say, this is the highest, the best high school lineman I've ever seen in Jordan Seaton. But regardless, I think that they're looking at the whole thing. Like, is he big enough? Because he's not the biggest guy. Is his arm big enough? I think it is, but I'm not an NFL evaluator.
Yeah, I'm not huge on the arm strength thing. Like, if you can, because it's about timing.
Yeah.
If you know what the timing is, like Joe Montana didn't have the biggest arm. You know what I mean?
He seemed to be pretty good. I mean, I didn't grow up a Niners fan per se. I was admiring them from Dallas.
Tom Brady didn't have the biggest arm. Peyton Manning didn't have the biggest arm.
Yeah, there's
Drew Brees didn't have the biggest arm.
Then they all seem to do just fine. Some people tell you Bo Nix doesn't have a big arm.
Yeah.
Pretty sure he threw it 67 yards to Marvin Mims and made plenty of other good throws.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's just the totality of like, what is his personality? Will he come in and demand things? Because that was one of the things we heard coming out of the combine. But the Giants, they brought him to Jersey. They were at his pro day. They had 13 people at his pro day. They talked to him at the combine. They talked to him at the East-West Shrine game. They were then here a week ago, right before the spring game last Thursday, because I literally saw the bulk of the Giants contingent getting off the elevator to the parking garage as I was getting on it to go talk to Coach Prime. And then I saw one of their personnel people that wasn't traveling with them, asked how the workout went, and he said, great. So that's where I think that even if they don't go there at 3, the Giants will be back on the phone. And that's what makes the Broncos at 20 potentially really valuable. And maybe the couple teams in front of them too, especially if Jackson Dart and Shedeur slide past 6 with the Raiders, 7 with the Jets, 9 with the Saints, and get into the late teens. Then the Broncos, I think, will certainly be open for business. No one's phones look like this anymore, really. But
so, does anyone have a flip phone anymore out there? They just got to bring those back. These phones are just like this now. It's just
Hey, call me later.
Call me. So let's kind of move through the rest of the first round from your mock and the kind of the noteworthy picks, the ones that you think have ramifications for the Broncos or the ones that you find particularly interesting after 3.
We had heard that Mason Graham was a done deal to Jacksonville, but I think Liam Cohen has exerted himself as a rookie coach, first-time GM, and then Tony Baselli's also there working with the GM, who's 34 years old, coming over from the Rams, and Liam Cohen, who's 38, 39, whatever he is. So you got a couple of young guys. You got a Hall of Famer in Tony Baselli, who's never really been on the day-to-day football side. He's been an advisor at times, kind of. He called their games forever. So you got those 3 guys in there. It sounds like Liam Cohen is exerting himself, saying, you want Trevor Lawrence to get better? I'm going to need some more weapons around him.
Yeah.
Especially because they lost Christian Kirk. And so do they go Ashton Genty at 5? Is this such a running back rich draft, which we think that it is, that a team like the Bears, and that's what I put in my mock draft, the Bears really would love Ashton Genty too. They've got a few more pieces there. They could offer up their second rounder and whatever else it takes to go from 10 to 5. Ashton Genty, I feel like, is going at 5, whether that's to the Jags or one of those teams.
Yeah, you think so?
Nearby. I don't think he's even getting to the Raiders at 6. And maybe the Raiders are the team that jump from 6 to 5 with the Jags and offer up whatever else.
Could the Broncos be that team that jumps?
Yeah.
For Ashton.
It just doesn't feel like it's worth it because
what would the Broncos have to give up?
Almost the same thing that you have to give for Travis. You're still going to give your 2 number ones and 2 more picks at least.
Yeah.
Like, or definitely next year's number, but no, 2 number ones probably just to get there, to go 15 spots.
There's like a formula for that.
There's a formula, and we can talk about it real quick. I could probably even find one and send it for Andy to throw up here in a second. But Jimmy Johnson created it, the Hall of Fame coach of the Dallas Cowboys, and obviously won championship at the Hurricanes, good coach with the Dolphins. He had this points value chart, and it has picks 1 to 272 or whatever it ends up being with the compensatory picks. And so pick 1 is worth like 4,000, but the drop from 1 to even 10 is like 4,000 to like 12. It's significant. I need to find it.
So
and
Jimmy Johnson architected this whole,
and everyone has modified theirs to some degree, but it's,
and yet there's so many. I'll let you look it up. And then there's so many subjective sort of pieces of information around every single player and every single pick. And, some guys who are worth 4,000 points in the points chart because, they were drafted number 1 overall end up sucking because, like we were saying before, they go to a bad team. They go to a bad team that's a bad organization and a bad line and a bad this and a bad that. And then they end up sucking, and you were able to get a bunch of value for the trade. So it's an art and it's not a science, even though some of these formulas are looked at as math equations. It ends up being an art, and you got to have guys who have experience, who are those artists. George Payton, Sean Payton are those experienced artists who are able to plug in guys into their system and get more out of them than the points value chart would indicate, right? And so pretty fascinating the way it's done, but there clearly is a chart right there that we're gonna
get to you here as soon as we can. But 3,000 is kind of the working number. But so here's your drop off. So 3,000 down to 2,600, down to 2,200. But so look where the Broncos are, all the way down at 20. That's 850.
Mm-hmm.
So you basically, that's why you need 3 number ones, even though you don't know where your ones are going to be, to get you back up.
So if you trade away your 20th pick, you need to get 850 points back from whatever picks you accept for it or whatever.
You need to know if you
were going to trade up.
If you're trading up to 17, or to 5, which is 1,700 on the chart.
Yeah,
you're going to need at least next year's number 1, if not a couple.
Yeah,
but that's why look at how much it would cost to get to.
But isn't that a lot of that
Travis
subjective
Hunter.
based on how you do next year? Because your number 1 could be, if you suck, your number 1's in the top 10, but if you make the playoffs, your number's in the bottom 10, and those points charts differentials would be different, right?
Absolutely.
So do you take that into account? Like, how good is this team that we're getting these picks from?
That's why the Niners a couple of years ago, when they traded up to go get Trey Lance, they had to send a king's ransom because it was 3 number ones.
The assumption is the Niners are always going to be good.
They were, and they had been good.
And so they're the back of the first round.
Yeah.
And the back of the first round, they're saying this year is like, not much different than the second round, right?
Yeah. That's where it gets kind of, that's why the value 590 for pick 32, but 510 for pick 39. So you're less than 100 points there.
Yeah.
The reason teams jump back into the first round, and you'll hear them talking about it tonight on the draft, you'll hear us talking about it, is because of the way the rookie salary structure works.
How does the rookie salary structure work?
So if you're a first round pick, the team gets to decide that they want to put a 5th-year option on you, which they decide before your 4th year. Only 50%, since they've done this, only 50%, maybe that number is even down, of first round picks have signed a second deal with the team that's taken them.
Is that right?
And that's over like that's since the new CBA, which was Vaughn's rookie year, so 2011. Chris Harris, who's going to be part of our draft coverage, 2011, So in 14, 15 years, for every player you're going to re-sign, we can think of Shane Ray. We can think of guys that aren't here for the second deal.
So what does that tell you about first round picks? I mean, who's bailing out on that? The team isn't getting the value they want out of the guys they choose in the first round. And so that would indicate that trading 3 first round picks might not be a huge deal if you really love a guy, because half of those don't work out anyway.
Yeah, I think it depends on your team and your personnel department and their success. So the Ravens hit on their first rounder almost every year. The Steelers have hit on their first rounder a bunch. Say what you want about the Cowboys, and they have plenty of issues, and we know it starts at the top. But Stephen Jones, Jerry's son, who's been in that same job since 1989, and you do any job for 35 years, he might be good at it. 36 years now. Will McClay, who keeps not leaving to go take GM jobs, even though he's just director of personnel. They've, in their last 8 drafts, drafted 7 guys that have made a first-team All-Pro. So I get that they may do things weird with contracts.
They haven't made the playoffs in a while either, so that's why they're always drafting in the top 10 or close to it, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're picking 12 tonight.
Yeah, or like top 15.
Yeah,
top half, I guess.
And
so
they made it a couple times.
Players.
But right.
But then there's teams like the Jaguars who always suck.
Jets, Browns,
the Titans, Browns. Like they don't have a lot of all pros, and they're always picking in the top 10.
It's just because it's not an exact science, despite all the work that you do on these players. You don't know how much they love football. You don't know how much they're playing through an injury that's somehow not showing up, or something chronic shows up afterwards that you just didn't know about, or something happens in their life that changes the way they approach every day, that they don't want to play football the same way they did, or they've never loved it. They've just been really good at it, and you couldn't tell because they said all the right things, and you got them in the building, and it turns out they just showed up when they needed to, but not beyond that.
And then you get probably an inexperienced coach, because usually these bad teams are going through some coaching changes, and so you get a young, inexperienced coach dealing with a high draft pick who may, like you said, be having some misgivings or not loving football. Well, Sean Payton could figure out how to get you back on track, right? How to motivate you, know how to create a system that allows you to fall in and be. But if a young, inexperienced coach has to deal with a malcontent, maybe not in his wheelhouse.
Well, that's for all the criticisms of Sean Payton's lack of Super Bowl appearances, Mike Tomlin's lack of Super Bowl appearances, they win a lot of games and they go to the playoffs a lot. And I understand that they, in both cases, had Hall of Fame quarterbacks for a big chunk of that, but they get players back on track. Let's see what Zach Wilson does. It's almost inevitable he's going to play, because Tua just can't finish a year or doesn't play through the entire season, gets hurt in the middle and comes back. So let's see how Zach Wilson is after a year around Sean Payton. And that's just one kind of test case. But other players that haven't necessarily thrived in a situation he thought would have been good for him, come to Sean Payton, and Andy Reid. I'm saying even before Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, this version's different. But all those years in Philly where they were good but never got over the hump to win it all. John Harbaugh, he's only won 1 Super Bowl, but they've been really good for a lot of years. They just gave him a new 3-year deal.
Yeah,
I think Jim Harbaugh might fall into that. Pete Carroll, and so that's why teams not firing guys. I give John Mara a lot of credit, because it would have been easy to fire Joe Shane and especially Brian Daboll. I think Brian Daboll is a good coach, and he's had Pat Shurmur and Joe Judge and Ben McAdoo and all these guys that he's like, let's give it one more year, because I think
he had 1 winning season in his 3, right? Or is he going into his 4th?
Yeah, his first year with Jones. That's why they gave him the big deal.
They were like 9-7 or something. I don't even know if they won 10 games, but they made it to the playoffs and they won a playoff game.
Yeah, that was year 1. This will be year 4, because Davis Webb started week 18, week 19, whatever that was.
Yeah.
The final game, because they had their playoff spot locked and they couldn't move.
Yeah.
So Daniel Jones sat and Davis Webb started that game. And then the next year here's the Broncos quarterbacks coach.
And now he's a rising star in the coaching community.
Yeah.
So back to the number 1 picks and the Broncos' ability to hit on those. And George Payton, he's had 2, Pat Surtain and Bo Nix.
I think he's hit.
He's hit on them. And so let's circle back to what the Broncos are going to do tonight. And we're going to be covering it live here. We're going to have a watch along, and then we're going to bleed right into the Nuggets coverage. It's going to be an extravaganza here at Guerrilla Sports today. So tune in tonight. We're going to start at 6:00. We're also going to have an off-field show tomorrow as well to pick up on all this momentum and talk about what the Broncos did and preview that next day draft and the following day and see how this thing shakes out. But tonight, the Broncos are on the clock at number 20. Brandon, if you had to make a prediction, who do you got? What are they going to do?
I think they're going to trade down. I think that it's going to end up being crazy enough, and either Jackson Dart or Shedeur Sanders or both will be there. And a team's going to want to jump in front of the Steelers to get one of those guys. And so I guess we can't discount what the Bucs are going to do at 19 because they may jump the Broncos. But then I think they're going to be looking to trade back. I just don't see them taking a running back at 20. Not Omarion Hampton, not Travion Henderson. I think they probably like both those guys. They've done plenty of work on them. I think Sean Payton would rather get a stud wide receiver. So is that Luther Burden? Is it Ibuka from Ohio State? Is it Matthew Golden from Texas if he slides? I just see that. There's no way Tetairoa McMillan from Arizona is getting that far. I think he's the player that the Jags want, but they know they don't need to take him at 5, and somebody wants Ashton Genty. So I just think that the Broncos are in a great spot. And when you have the quarterback, especially on a rookie deal, and you're really good up front on both sides, if they stick there and Walter Nolan's there, I could see him getting in there to help that D-line rotation. Then you can move on from JFM next year if you don't give him the new deal that he wants.
What's the deal with JFM? Isn't he an awesome player for the Broncos?
He's a great player. He's high on the list.
He is sort of developing into a bit of a malcontent too, because he's seeing other people get paid. He's like, what about me? Why not pay JFM?
Well, they have to pay Zach Allen too.
Yeah.
And I think they work well together, obviously, clearly.
Salary cap is up to $279.2 million now. It's gone up over $50 million in the last 2 years. $55 million in the last 2 years represents the largest increase in a 2-year period in NFL history. Don't you have enough money to pay these guys?
And you're getting more money because more Christmas games are coming and more packages are being made available.
It's an insane amount of money.
And some of it was COVID correction because they didn't jump as much in 21 and 22 coming off COVID. And
you know what the sorry to interrupt you. Do you know what the salary cap was in 1994? Take a guess.
Like 50 million?
34 million.
Wow.
$34 million in 94. My last year in 2008, it was 115 million. And it's been going up steadily ever since. It was 225 a couple years ago. It was 250 last year. Now it's 279.
And that's why teams like the Niners, who leverage their future and now have had to get rid of a bunch of guys.
Yeah.
And the Broncos are kind of the beneficiaries of that. And the Eagles especially, but they got a Super Bowl to show for it, have just pushed salaries out. The Saints did it, and it came back to bite them because they didn't have anything to show for it. And they maybe were the most egregious. That's why their salary cap has been so screwed up. And the Broncos not only can do that, but they have money clearing up because of just the way their salaries were structured. And yes, they've given Garrett Bowles a new deal and PS2, but they're still between like 80 and 100 million potentially available for next year. And the cap's going to jump again.
Yeah.
If it jumps even from 279 to 290, it doesn't go all the way to 300.
Yeah.
So they can take that into account. And that's why I think Zach Allen, JFM may get new deals. I was just saying, I think
I'd
Walter
like to see
Nolan,
JFM stick around. He's been
me too,
a big boon for this defense. All right. What about this question from Conga Hydra? Would they take Jahdae Barron if he falls?
I like him out of Texas. He can play inside and outside. He's 5'11". He's one of those dudes that can just tackle, similar to a Chris Harris. He's a little bigger and I think a little faster, runs really smooth. But if you watch Texas, he's in a lot of ways their most impressive defensive player, even though they've got, pro caliber guys up front in their front seven. He was always around the ball. When he blitzed from the nickel, he can play inside, play outside. He's kind of a big nickel if you were going to play him like that, but you can play him outside as a corner. I think they'd love it if he fell to 20. And I know Vance Joseph, I haven't talked to him about it, but I imagine that if he was there, he'd love to use him because he had Budda Baker for all those years. And you can kind of use him, not exactly like that. Budda's more of a safety linebacker. This guy's a corner kind of nickel.
Might Vance be using Talanoa Hufanga like that?
Maybe so. And so then, but you could also potentially play play him outside and play or Barron outside and play Riley inside some.
Right.
It gives you a lot of options. I think if he's there, I don't think he's going to be there at 20. I think I mocked him 15 or 16 to one of those teams right there in the middle, 15 or 16. I gotta look at it again, but it was one of those where I just think he's a heck of a player. A lot of people are making a big deal about Will Johnson, the corner at Michigan. So many good players from Michigan that if they would have had a quarterback this year, they might have had a chance to repeat, but they just weren't able to do it. But I have Jahdae Barron going 16 to the Cardinals.
So last year, 6 quarterbacks taken in the top 12, including Bo Nix.
There will be less.
Yeah, there will be less. But you can never count out a quarterback being overdrafted. The quarterback is overvalued in the NFL, in my opinion, and not just my opinion. Quarterbacks are overdrafted. And the head nod.
Well, no, are you saying the value of the position or where they're drafted?
Oh, where they're drafted. So
100%.
So a team that needs a quarterback will reach for one earlier than he should be drafted based on his talent.
The Titans may be the best example.
Yeah.
They should take Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter.
Right,
But
exactly.
those guys are can't miss prospects, it feels
And if
like.
you take a couple years and build up the team around the quarterback position, then when you finally do find your quarterback, he's in a better position and not asked to do it all himself, like these young guys are asked to do on these bad football teams. And they continue to be bad, and their careers end up being, damaged by the lack of support around them, the lack of vision for them, the lack of defense, the lack of offensive line, the lack of play calling prowess, things like that. But my question is, is there a possibility that another, like these quarterbacks get overdrafted again tonight? Is it a possibility that 3 get drafted in the top 10? Jackson Dart and Shedeur go in the top 10, which would change the dominoes falling towards the rest of the draft. Is there who's the 4th quarterback out there?
A lot of people think it's Jalen Milroe. And I know that, I guess we need to double check this. He had accepted an invitation to go to Green Bay, which is pretty risky unless a team is guaranteeing they're going to grab him even in the later part of the first round, which makes no sense based on those teams. So one of these other teams, Cleveland, New York, is saying, hey, we're going to trade back in. We're getting you. Like, I get that everyone thinks we're taking Dart or Sanders or whatever. You're the guy, and his physical tools are off the charts. Like Anthony Richardson level athleticism, maybe not the true freak that he is. He's a little smaller, might actually be straight line faster than Anthony Richardson, and a lot of raw physical ability with his arm. And so Alabama, we know, has had lots of pros. They didn't have as many this year because guys left after Saban. And so I think that he's the one. I don't say he'll be overdrafted, but he's the most interesting. It feels like some people think Tyler Shook out of Louisville, who's I think 25 or 26 years old and has gone to a bunch of schools, he might be overdrafted as well. But I think you're absolutely right. The Raiders may be throwing up a smokescreen. Tom Brady knows Shedeur Sanders as well as anybody that's drafting. And if he likes him enough, he's calling the shots there. I don't care about Geno Smith's new deal.
Oh, you think Tom Brady can walk in the room and be like, we're drafting Shedeur?
Tom Brady's going to own the Raiders.
Oh, you think so?
I know so. Talking to people over there, like
how does that work? Because isn't Mark Davis
has no kids. So now that Tom Brady and his business partner, are owners, they get first right of refusal to buy the rest of especially if it's in the language of the contract. That's why you have to be approved by other owners. If not, owners could just be giving the team away to knuckleheads. They're like, oh, it's my drinking buddy. Now he owns the team.
Yeah. And
so you have to be approved. So Tom and his partner are, and so this is set up, and that's why he owns part of the Aces. And that's why he's taking a $35 million a year job with Fox, because that's just more money that he can put towards being able to buy in and run the team. So he's the one that Pete certainly has plenty of influence. Spytek obviously is there to help run the day-to-day. But Tom Brady signs off on Geno because Pete wants him, understands. If Tom wants Shedeur, Mark Davis is not going to hesitate to say, no, we're taking Shedeur at 6. Especially if the running back in Ashton Genty's gone at 5.
And if they don't take Shedeur at 6, then you'll know what Tom Brady really thinks of Shedeur, right?
Yeah, that he likes him, they're pals, but
maybe he doesn't believe in him, at least at that level. All right, one more quick question about quarterbacks. Aaron Rodgers it's been largely silent on the Aaron Rodgers front. How does Aaron Rodgers factor into this draft? I mean, is anyone waiting around for Aaron Rodgers to make a decision, or are people going to just assume he's not playing now?
Well, he was on Pat McAfee, right? And he said that I could still retire. I could still play. Like, we get it, Brett Favre. It's fine. You can do yes, you can do those things. I think that what happens tonight will dictate which teams get louder. And so if the Steelers like Shedeur or like Jackson Dart and miss both of them and don't want to take the time to wait for Jalen Milroe to come along, or don't love Tyler Shook, then they're calling Tom Brady with a little more, or they're calling Aaron Rodgers with a little more enthusiasm. And maybe, probably not the Giants, but if I'm the Saints, I'm at least calling them and saying, hey, we'll give you another $100 million for the next 2 years.
We'll give you $100 million,
$120 million. Like, come down here to the Saints. Derek Carr is hurt. We can maybe get him on the injury list where he doesn't count as much against the cap, or however that works. And so I think that's how those dominoes will fall. Or then he's waiting around for somebody to get hurt.
Yeah.
There's no way Aaron Rodgers is going to go through an entire football season and not be heard from. So while he may not have a job by the end of the weekend, or even by June 1, let alone August 1, by October 1, he'll have a job.
You think so?
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah, he has a hard time walking away, and you can't blame him. He's been doing this his whole life, and he's been one of the best to ever do it. So I can't begrudge him this hard decision he's making.
I got one more team,
too.
A team that near and dear to your heart, certainly as a kid.
Niners.
as the Niners are going through this with Brock Purdy, and I get that Brock Purdy showed up at OTAs, and maybe with Aaron, you're like, look, our cap is screwed. But if you want to come wear number 12 for your favorite team as a kid and ride off into the sunset, we've got some pieces here. We've got George Kittle. We've got obviously Christian McCaffrey and a pretty solid defense.
Yeah,
come on, let's go in a winnable
and a play caller,
winnable division. I think.
And a play caller like Kyle. And you mentioned the childhood team. I mean, he's a Bay Area kid. He went to a junior college, Butte. He went to Cal. He thought he was going to get drafted by the Niners. He was hoping, fingers crossed. They went with Alex Smith instead, and he had to fall to the end of the first round. And that was his origin story as his, superhero Aaron Rodgers, spited by the NFL and not drafted where he thought he was going to be drafted.
I think Shador has some of the Aaron Rodgers personality traits that are hard for NFL teams to wrap their mind around. And I think we don't remember that, but I think that played into why he fell as far as he did. And then Green Bay's like, wait, we got a kid that was supposed to go number 1 in the 20s. Brett's not playing forever. Let's get his successor. And then it works so well with Aaron as they've found out about his personality over the years. Let's go get another one. I get that he wants a receiver, but we're going to take Jordan Love, and they're in pretty good shape.
Yeah. All right. That pretty much does it for us. I'm going to make my prediction, though. At number 20. I don't think it's going to be very sexy. I don't think they're going to trade up. I don't think they're going to trade back. I think they're going to stand pat at 20 and take the best player available, the one they like the most. I don't know who that guy's going to be, but I'll tell you what position I think it's going to be. It's going to be either a tight end, a receiver, a defensive lineman, or a corner. That's what I think.
But you don't think running back either, which is what I've been trying to,
I just
drive home on all these mocks.
Exactly. Just it's a deep running back class. Sean Payton's sort of a gadget personnel guy. I don't really see him trying to draft a workhorse running back in the first round. I see them going for a different position, getting a running back, maybe even 2 running backs, maybe even a second and third round running back, possibly, right? Or a second and a 6th or whatever it might be. But I think they're going to stand pat at 20. And we're going to stand pat right here. We're going to be back at 6 o'clock tonight. We're going to take you all the way up through the Nuggets game and a post-game Nugget show as well. And then Off-Field is going to be back here tomorrow morning at 11 to break down everything the Broncos did or didn't do tonight at the draft. He's Brandon Krisztal. I'm Nate Jackson. This was Off-Field Guerrilla Sports. See you later.